It was meant to be an elegant, celebratory conversation with one of Hollywood's most revered actresses. Meryl Streep, the woman synonymous with versatility, grace, and depth, was scheduled to appear on The View to discuss her recent acclaimed performance in a biographical drama and her evolving advocacy work in the industry. Audiences were eager to see her share insight into her storied career, her views on acting in today's socially conscious landscape, and her perspective on aging gracefully in an unforgiving industry. What no one anticipated was that her conversation with co-host Whoopi Goldberg, a legend in her own right, would erupt into a deeply personal and ideological clash that would shake the audience and send shockwaves through the entertainment world. The initial tone was warm, if a little formal, as Meryl exchanged compliments with the panelists. But underneath the polished smiles, there was already tension between Meryl and Whoopi that would soon boil to the surface with surprising ferocity. After opening with reflections on her early career and current film role, Meryl graciously answered questions from the panel, offering thoughtful anecdotes and philosophical musings. But then Whoopi shifted gears and said, "Meryl, let's be real for a second. You've done all these roles. You've got all these awards. But for someone with so much influence, you've stayed pretty silent during a lot of turning points in Hollywood." The room grew quiet. Meryl blinked. "I've used my platform when it mattered," she said evenly. Whoopi tilted her head, clearly unconvinced. "You made a speech at the Golden Globes about Trump, but where were you during the uprising for black filmmakers? You sit in rooms where decisions are made. Why haven't we seen you use that seat more visibly?" Meryl looked taken aback. "That's not a fair assessment," she said, her tone sharpening. "I don't post about every cause, but that doesn't mean I haven't fought for change behind the scenes." Whoopi, now leaning forward, replied, "Sometimes behind the scenes isn't enough." Meryl took a slow breath, trying to compose herself. "I've always believed in the integrity of action over optics," she said. "Visibility matters," Whoopi snapped, "especially when the industry still marginalizes women of color." Meryl's eyes narrowed. "I support women of color. I've worked on initiatives that aim to change the systemic imbalance in this business." Whoopi shook her head. "We need more than quiet support. We need voices like yours to amplify ours, not just sit comfortably in applause." For a moment, Meryl seemed lost for words. She had expected probing questions, but not a confrontation. "I'm here because I care. Care about what's happening. In this industry, I care about inclusion. But I won't be attacked for not being loud enough on every issue." "That kind of expectation isn't fair," she said. Whoopi responded, "But that's the point. It's not about being fair. About being accountable." The tension was now palpable, and the other hosts fell quiet, unsure how to de-escalate. Trying to regain balance, Sarah N. asked Meryl about her role in mentoring young actresses. Meryl responded carefully, offering examples of how she's guided emerging talent, but Whoopi wasn't done. She interjected, "You know, mentoring is great, but what's more powerful is standing next to us when it counts. Not just sending a quiet donation or a nod of approval." Meryl turned to her with a stunned expression. "Are you accusing me of being performative?" she asked, the coolness in her voice now gone. "No," Whoopi said flatly. "I'm saying if you're not with us vocally when it's tough, you're not really with us." The words hit like a punch. Meryl sat back, her jaw set. "I don't need to prove my worth to you or to anyone else," she said. "I've earned my place, and I've used it responsibly. Maybe not in the way you want, but I don't owe anyone a checklist of activism." Whoopi didn't look away. But that's exactly the problem. The air in the room was tense, brittle, about to snap. The crowd, unsure whether this was part of a planned exchange or an unscripted implosion, remained dead silent. Joy tried to pivot the conversation toward lighter ground, mentioning Meryl's a famous role in doubt and how powerful her performances have been in shifting public perspectives. But the damage had already been done. Meryl no longer looked like the graceful elder stateswoman of film. She looked like someone deeply offended, struggling to keep her dignity intact. "I came here thinking we'd talk about the craft of acting, the art I've dedicated my life to," she said coldly. "But instead, I've walked into a tribunal questioning my morality." Whoopi leaned back, her tone unchanged. We're not questioning your morality. We're questioning your silence. Meryl stood up, calmly but firmly unhooking her mic. This isn't a conversation. This is accusation masked as activism, she said. And I won't be lectured like this, not when I've done more than most people know. Asterisk, as she stepped away from the table, one of the producers motioned to cut to commercial, but Meryl turned and looked directly at Whoopi. You don't know me? You don't know what I've done? Didn't now once. And I won't be defined by a single narrative. That fits today's Twitter discourse, she said. Whoopi replied without flinching. And I won't pretend silence is strength just because it's polite. Meryl shook her head slowly and walked off set. The moment was captured on camera. Just before the feed was cut, within minutes, Twitter exploded. Clips flooded. TikTok. Media outlets raced to break the story, spinning the confrontation in every possible direction. Hashtag Meryl storms off. Hashtag Whoopi V's Meryl. And hashtag The View meltdown all trended within the hour. Some saw. Whoopi is a truth teller, holding Hollywood royalty accountable. Others believed Meryl was unfairly ambushed and disrespected by someone who should have known better. The incident became more than just a headline. It became a cultural lightning rod. Asterisk. ABC released a vague statement later that afternoon. Today's discussion was passionate and reflected the diverse opinions of our hosts and guests. We respect Meryl Streep and appreciate her contributions to the arts. It said everything and nothing. Meryl's team issued a more pointed message. Ms. Streep appeared in good faith to discuss her latest work. She was unprepared for the personal interrogation that occurred and chooses to focus on work that uplifts rather than divides. Whoopi remained silent on social media, but addressed it briefly on the next episode. We had a tough moment yesterday, sometimes tough conversations. Don't go the way we hope. But this is The View, and we don't shy away from truth. That only deepened the divide. Op-eds popped up across platforms, dissecting every word and moment. Was it a power struggle between generations of feminism? A breakdown in solidarity? Or simply two outspoken icons colliding with no room for mutual grace? Asterisk, the deeper layers of the clash revealed a lot more than just two women disagreeing. Meryl, for decades, has represented the polite liberal voice of Hollywood speaking out. Yes, but rarely shaking the table. Whoopi, once a barrier-breaking Oscar winner, now a cultural watchdog on daytime TV, has never shied away from confronting her peers. What their clash showed was the friction between legacy and urgency. Meryl's grace met Whoopi's grit, and the resulting firestorm left the industry gasping. In the days that followed, actors, journalists, and fans weighed in. Viola Davis commented, "Confrontation can be growth if we listen after the heat fades." Ava DuVernay wrote, "Two truths collided. We must hold both." Even Oprah chimed in cryptically, posting, "Bridges built from broken ground stand strongest." The irony was, both Meryl and Whoopi had spent their lives advocating for women. For truth, for expression, and yet, in this moment, they had become symbols of division. Asterisk, as the controversy wore on. Meryl canceled her remaining press appearances for the film she was promoting, retreating from the spotlight. Sources close to her said she was deeply hurt by the exchange and felt blindsided by how quickly the tone had shifted. Whoopi, on the other hand, continued her role on The View unchanged, receiving both praise and criticism. The show's ratings spiked dramatically, but producers reportedly had emergency meetings about future guest protocols. The question was no longer about who was right or wrong. It was about what kind of discourse the public actually wants. Do we want authenticity, even when it's painful? Or do we prefer polite, rehearsed interviews that keep everything pretty? On the surface, the clash forced everyone watching to examine their own discomfort with confrontation between women, especially powerful women, especially women who have long been expected to lead by being perfect. Asterisk, in the end, Meryl Streep walking off The View wasn't about one question or one comment. It was about a long brewing conversation in Hollywood coming to a head, live on air, in front of millions. It was a reminder that even legends can be vulnerable, and even icons can lose composure. But more importantly, it was a sign of how high the stakes have become when power, legacy, and accountability collide. Meryl's storm off wasn't just a dramatic moment, it was a declaration that not every space is safe for every kind of dialogue, and that sometimes silence isn't surrender, but self-preservation. Whether you sided with Meryl's calm dignity or Whoopi's unfiltered conviction, the episode proved that when two voices with power meet without alignment, sparks fly. And sometimes, in those sparks, the world sees itself more clearly than it would in any carefully planned monologue. The clash won't be forgotten, because it wasn't just television, it was a mirror.